Yesterday was a pretty big day in Ottawa as Parliament reconvened. Joining me now to talk about it is our parliamentary reporter, Ray Filion. Ray, Governor General Julie Payette read the prepared text of the throne speech, and a lot of it discussed tax breaks for middle-income Canadians, plus a focus on gun control and climate change.
Exactly. Pretty much what the Liberals talked about during most of the election campaign we had earlier this fall. A lot of pomp and circumstance for this grandiose event on Parliament Hill. As you know, the Senate is now in a building of its own, pending renovation work that's going to last the better part of the next decade on Parliament Hill. So yeah, no surprises, no poison pills in that speech from the throne, which is really going to be one of the first tests of confidence for the new minority Liberal government. Climate change, healthcare, gun control, First Nations. The speech also confirms that the government's priority will be the promised tax cut, making the first $15,000 you earn per year tax-free. Right now, it's the first $12,000, $400 you don't pay tax on. So no surprises. There was only a brief mention, and this is something that people out west and the Conservatives noted, only a very brief mention of natural resources in that speech from the throne. And it was this, I have the text right here. While the government takes strong action to fight climate change, it will also work just as hard to get Canadian resources to new markets and offer unwavering support to the hardworking women and men in Canada's natural resources sector, many of whom have faced tough times recently. The Tories and the New Democrats say that's not enough. They want more. They haven't said that they're going to be voting against the speech from the throne. However, the government is safe because the Bloc Québécois announced immediately that they're going to be supporting it. According to their leader, Yves-François Blanchet, there's enough in that speech from the throne that they can live with.
So the Liberals are saying they want to support our energy sector, natural resources, getting it to market. Does that mean they're going to turf C-69 and C-48? That's what we want to know here in Alberta.
They're not going that far, and I don't think it's going to happen either.
Okay. Now, the MPs chose their speaker. Ray, who's the lucky candidate?
Anthony Rota, an MP from Northern Ontario, who's been around for a while. He was first elected back in 2004, although he lost his election in 2011. He came back in 2015. He was one of 5 candidates. There was one from Quebec, 2 from Ontario, and Jeff Reagan, the outgoing speaker, who is running again. He's from Nova Scotia. But most of his colleagues decided to go for his Liberal colleague, Mr. Rota, who noted with emotion during his speech that he's the first Canadian of Italian descent to become Speaker of the House of Commons here in the nation's capital. He almost choked up saying that. He also spoke a little bit of Italian during his speech. This is a job, as we said before, that comes with some big responsibilities. You have to maintain decorum, and it's especially hard in a minority parliament. But it also comes with some interesting perks: an official residence in the Gatineau Hills, not too far from Ottawa, an official apartment on Parliament Hill, and an $85,000 a year bonus on top of your MP salary, which amounts to $264,000 a year. So not bad. Anthony Rota, you're going to hear a lot about this guy over the coming years.
284 grand, Italian descent, first speaker of Italian. Free gelato for everyone. That's what I say, right? Free gelato in the hell. Now, Ray, a lot of talk around the water coolers is how U.S. President Donald Trump called Prime Minister Justin Trudeau two-faced. But you know, Trump wasn't the only one. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh also says there are 2 Trudeaus, one we see in public and the other one in private.
Yeah, a lot was said about that video, that candid moment that was seen around the world. And Joe Biden, I don't know if you saw the commercial that was aired on social media on Wednesday evening. Joe Biden is actually using that footage to tell Americans, look, people around the world are making fun of our president. So CNN reported on Thursday that Donald Trump was actually enraged when he first saw the footage, which was, of course, aired profusely on Fox News Network, his favorite news channel. Listen, it remains to be seen how bad it's going to make Canada look on the international stage, whether or not it's going to have some negative repercussions for Canada in the United States and its all too important relationship with Washington. But I think it's bad for Mr. Trudeau for 2 reasons. Number one, it undermines his entire government strategy, which ever since Donald Trump became U.S. president a few years ago, was to never say anything negative about the American president. Bite your tongue, bide your time. He's going to lash out at you. Don't respond. That's always been the strategy. And it worked. When you look at the dividends it paid in the USMCA renegotiation, the whole NAFTA thing. So Mr. Trudeau didn't live up to that pledge that he made when Donald Trump became American president. The other reason I think where it hurts Mr. Trudeau is that many people have accused the Prime Minister of being a phony. And here you have Justin Trudeau playing nice when he's in front of the cameras with the American president and making fun of him behind the scenes. Although this is not really surprising what happened, I'm sure every single world leader who's had to rub shoulders with the American president has behaved the way Mr. Trudeau did at Buckingham Palace when he was caught by that TV camera and that microphone. Hey, did you see what Donald Trump did? Did you hear what he said? Can you believe that? The only difference is Mr. Trudeau was caught and for the whole world to see. So it kind of looks bad.
Maybe somebody needs to speak to our Prime Minister about being camera aware, where the cameras are at all times. You have to be concerned about that, right?
Yeah, somebody in PMO told me the day after the incident, what was a camera doing there? It was a private reception. Well, when you're on the international stage, when you're a Prime Minister of a country, when you're Justin Trudeau, there's pretty much always a camera. You have to watch yourself.
Now, our PM had an uncomfortable moment when Trump told him that Canada needs to spend a little bit more money when it comes to our support of NATO.
Yeah, we talked about this week. The president of the United States has been calling recently in the last couple of years on other NATO nations to live up to their pledge, which is to spend 2% of their budget on the equivalent of 2% of their GDP on the military. Canada is nowhere near that, although it's doing better than many other countries. And the American president, during the news conference that he had with Justin Trudeau, he asked him point blank, "What's your number?" And the funny thing is, Prime Minister Trudeau answered the American president the way he answers us journalists when we ask him a direct question most of the time, is that he doesn't answer the question directly. He started by talking about the improvements, the extra money that Canada has been spending on the military in the past couple of years, right, the extra money it intends to spend in the coming years. And at that point, the American president kind of looked puzzled, and he asked the question again, "So what's your number, Prime Minister?" And that's when Justin Trudeau turned to his aides, because he didn't know the numbers, surprisingly. He said, "Where are we at?" He was given the figure 1.3% of Canada's GDP. And Mr. Trudeau turned to President Trump and said 1.4. The actual number is apparently, I'm told, 1.31.
Right.
And Mr. Trudeau told Donald Trump it's 1.4. Mr. Trump called Canada slightly delinquent, I would say, but they'll be okay. I have confidence. Some other countries, said Donald Trump, are major delinquents. So I'm sure it's not a trip Justin Trudeau will remember fondly. That's the least we can
maybe it's 1.31 Canadian or US and the 1.4 I don't know.
Maybe.
Federal Tory leader Andrew Shue is continuing his efforts to shore up support for his leadership. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, he released a video. He published a video on social media this week that was actually recorded by one of his supporters, Conservative Senator Denise Bathurst. She recounted what happened back in 2004 after Stephen Harper, who was then leader of the newly united Conservative Party, lost that election to Paul Martin's Liberals. And she reminds everyone that back then a lot of people were calling on Mr. Harper to resign because he had failed to beat the Liberals. He decided to stick around, and he won the ensuing election in January 2006. So that's the story she tells in that video. Although things look really bad right now, I must say, for Mr. Scheer's leadership. There was a Léger poll conducted across Canada in the last couple of weeks that showed only 48%, less than half of Conservative supporters say he should stay on as leader. Just to compare, 87% of NDP supporters think Mr. Singh should stick around, should stay on as leader of the NDP. Overall, across Canada, 53% of respondents believe Mr. Scheer should quit as Tory leader. Only 24% said he should stay on. He got a standing ovation at a caucus meeting from his MPs and senators here on Parliament Hill the day before Parliament reconvened on Wednesday. But, you know, I remember Stéphane Dion getting standing ovations, Michael Ignatieff, and Tom Mulcair, and we know what happened next. They all lost their jobs. So he's in a very tough spot right now. I would say his leadership, it looks to me like it's hanging by a thread.
Ray, Huawei issued a recent statement on the one-year anniversary of the arrest of Meng Wanzhou in Canada. What were some of the details?
Meng Wanzhou, who wrote a 3-page letter to thank her supporters here in Canada and across the world. It's a 3-page letter titled, "Your warmth is a beacon that lights my way forward." She writes, "The past year has witnessed moments of fear, pain, disappointment, helplessness, torment, and struggle." She says that when she was in China, days would go by very quickly. And now it seems, she writes, that time passes very slowly. It is so slow, she writes, that I have enough time to read a book from cover to cover. I can take the time to discuss minutiae with my colleagues or to carefully complete an oil painting. She's under house arrest in Vancouver in her mansion.
Yes.
So she's not in jail. Now compare that with what the two Canadians, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, have been going through for nearly a year. They've been detained in a jail in China. One of them has had his reading glasses confiscated, so he can't read a book from cover to cover like she can. We're told also that their detention conditions are pretty bad. The lights in their cells are on apparently 24/7. So when you compare her sob story with what they're going through in China, there's a world of difference. I don't think she's getting a lot of sympathy from the Canadian government, certainly not from most Canadians who read that 3-page letter. And meanwhile, there was an interesting comment this week. Former Liberal Cabinet Minister John Manley is suggesting a prisoner swap between Canada and China. I don't think it's going to go anywhere personally. I don't think that Canada is interested in that, but we'll see.
Ray, in spite of a huge controversy he's embroiled in, Prince Andrew is still commander of 3 Canadian Forces units.
Yeah, that's right. As you know, he's been publicly accused by some people of forcing a 17-year-old girl to have sex with him. She was underage at the time. She recounted that story in a dramatic interview with the BBC earlier this week. As you probably know, you might have heard that many charities, including a high school he used to attend here in Ontario, have cut ties with the embattled prince. But in spite of that, you're right. He still remains commander-in-chief of 3 Canadian Forces units. We're talking here about the Queen's York Rangers, the Royal Highland Fusiliers of Canada, and the Princess Louise's Fusiliers. We asked the Prime Minister's office for comment this week. They wouldn't say anything. They referred us to the Minister of National Defense, who in turn referred us to the Department of National Defense. Nobody wanted to comment. The only person who commented in the political sphere was Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP. He publicly called on Prince Andrew to quit his responsibilities as commander-in-chief of those 3 Canadian battalions, but it's very complicated. In order for that to happen, we're told the Prime Minister would have to ask the Queen to get him to resign. And of course, when it comes to the monarchy, she's the head of state. It's a very delicate matter.
Big news for Albertans in that construction of the TMX expansion will finally begin. Or will it, Ray? Will we see more court challenges and delays?
Yeah, that remains to be seen. We don't know about court challenges. Anything can happen. Some groups are still upset, as you know, with the federal government. They're still fighting it out in court. So we'll see what happens with that. But in the meantime, the new Minister of Natural Resources, Seamus O'Regan, who was there for the official launch of the construction of that much-awaited expansion, called it a good day for Alberta, a good day for Canada. He said that the pipelines are going to go into the ground before Christmas, and it's going to take roughly 3 years to complete the work. So, yeah, a lot of people in Alberta are keeping their fingers crossed.
Absolutely. We definitely need that to help turn our economy around here. Our parliamentary reporter, Ray Filion, joining me once again from Ottawa. Thanks so much, Ray.
You bet, Hal.